opening of this sonata is probably the most difficult stylistic way to aim to the exact closest to the truth that we think it is, style of Mozart's expressing this dramatic pain, because he almost never uses ostinato on the beat, triads and chords in general. And with the modern piano and the pedal, it's easy to dramatize it Brahmsically. It's tempting to think of it a little drier because of the harpsichord origin. To grace note on the beat, or not to grace note on the beat. Half the value, quarter of the value, make this appoggiatura more painful, because on the beat and the accacciatura also how to express in the repeated notes a phrasing, as if it's as if it was a scale. Also in the second statement, he uses, instead of the double ostinato tonic dominant with second degree, he uses full second degree, and so it makes it a little bit more soft, or if not more painful. But both are very sensitive, and it's so important not to surrender to sense of sentimentality, when at the same time it has to be so driven and at the same time very expressive of this pain that it expresses, of course, besides the story of the death of his mother in Paris. I like to think that the second idea of the exposition would be this not only relative major, but almost reminiscence of happy old times. In any case, compared to the overcharged dramatically opening, this would be the contrast of the carelessness, fancy-free. Almost like hearing giggles and just being free from any weightless or heaviness. It's weightless. And these broken thirds. And when it comes in the relative major, it's sort of say lighten up mood. And when it comes in the recapitulation, it's chromatic, it's dramatic, and it's a little bit less rambunctious as the opening, less perky, pom 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 pom, but it's more pom 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 inside, almost resigned. Of a darker colorization with the Neapolitan 6. But to remain to the pianistic choices in the opening between articulation, pedal and repeated chords, this is without the foot, just by repeating the keys halfway after they lifted. Up too much. lacks the bite of this insistence that is so dramatic on the chord. Because when he goes to the conclusion of the first theme, he gave up on the chords. He goes back to the so neutral, so to say, Alberti bass. Poor man, famous for a bass pattern. But what an ingenious bass pattern to allow the rhythmicity and the drive and the harmony. In 16th notes would have been difficult, but by doing it allows for this motoric continuity without to have to repeat, because it would have been really impossible, stiffening the wrist and. Of course, not in the beginning. So yes, he reserves it specifically for that. And when it's his second idea, the opening becomes repeated note for half bar, which is relaxed. To think for the articulation that it needs to be air legato, as if it's tongued or articulated, and then for the scales after the broken thirds, a slur like as if it's legato in a boy, and then discussed that this is not necessarily entirely all detached in air legato, because left hand has still antiquo suspensions that could be more legato in that case in the right hand and modulate very light. Yeah, I think the right hand in this long bundle of 16th notes should be not only staccato nor only legato, but going through different landscapes or lightnings. And voicing out the bottom part. Softer. Right? This could be, but then it's too heavy for the tempo. It's important to always take the direction of the 16th notes. And then, and then, and then, and then. So every time you arrive on the first of the group of 16th notes, to theta 1, 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 to theta 1. So it's constantly rebouncing gently, never settling on the beats. The opposite of the. When he goes for the immediate counterpart to this opening dramatic, he opposes this staccato thirds. I call it poker face moment, because it's not sad, it's happy, it's just neutral, as if after the immense and unprecedented dramatic influx downbeat theme, accaciatura, repeated triads. It shouldn't be seductive and cute with pick-up cherries. Staccato. No, it should be just detached, but without an emotional influence, in order to return to this dramatic, alarming call, and finally getting out through the door of the relative major, evacuating the tension. Cadence has the rhythmic accelerando in its indication, so we don't have to rush, but it, on the contrary, add more space to the eighth note rest. Bum, 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 bum. And the second idea starts with an upbeat, whenever the first is downbeat. It's not? Here it's a beat. No, directly. Pedal front, there is a capacity of holding a little bit, but I prefer by the hand. And every time there is an arrival anticipated on the real note, he has it added as an appoggiatura. So I should change the finger to 3 and slightly jolt the wrist up. In the recap, he has the theme literally in the bass, and the right hand plays this violin pattern of broken 7/6 suspensions, which together correspond to create a harmonic, sustained, long values, but in a sort of tremolo, which leaves with the acoustic the opportunity for the pianist in a generous acoustic not to use pedal. So we hear the... But if it's acoustically dry, perhaps short pedals. Sense of pleading, especially with the accaciatura dissonant of the augmented second, augmented unison A sharp. Doesn't exist, it's a minor second, but with the A sharp, obviously, it's really a second with the accaciatura. When he has this kind of echo cells to play it as an echo. Intellectually it's absolutely be explainable, but I think musically it's belittling the drive of the piece. Perhaps he improvised, perhaps it was supposed to be not repeated exactly like it's written. But if it's not in the style of the day to improvise, because it's not acceptable as much in some circles, preferably just maintain the tutti. He's done on the downbeat of the bar before the end. Then at the last bar, he purposely doesn't finish on the downbeat, but on the third beat. And on the 10th of the third is an interval, is to remain in an open interval. That's too conclusive. That was for the last movement to be. But in the first movement end, it justifies a lot of the reasoning that the downbeats 1 and 3 are up, and 2 and 4 are impulsive to get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And when it's fast, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you never get heavy on 1. There's no downbeat on 1. Perhaps the only one you do is the very opening. The stabbing pain. It is very truly difficult, as I was saying in the earlier moments, of the fact that you have to find the sound that is not only the sound, but also the meaningful weight that we'll be inputting to go to the end of the phrase. And think in this certain sense, like as if you're on the rails of a track and you just follow it. We can find the only right one. It probably is the right one on the spot. Out of the thought process, you have to full circle, get the different options, and then decide at the moment of performance how you get into the piece, and just let it not govern you, but let yourself build the synthesis of the sense of it all out of the way you input the opening. And sometimes it's good to be playing a little bit with the situation of the moment, because too much planning might also be at some point over killing the spontaneity of this impulsive opening in Mozart's writing. Because if it's very intense, you'll tend for contrast to play much lighter than if you start with a reserved pain, and then it doesn't have to be so soft. And when it the conclusion. These running 16th notes have to be, because of the low register of the piano, the modern piano is heavy and thick. We need to have them crisp so that they're held. They're dotted with sostenuto, dotted 8th notes. They resonate like horns or like winds. And suspended on the top, this sustained sounds. Now this was for the exposition and for the recapitulation with the second theme in A minor and this incredible difference of color. But there is a development. Now that is another case scenario of choices, because like the opening is very intense and driven and motivated and wounded and vulnerably strong. Then the development uses that element but 3 times. So it starts in the innocence of the relative major. My delirium. But in any case, the reason I'm saying this is because in a perhaps cheesy way we expect to be relieved from the passionate intensity. We passed our sorrow. But he doesn't do that. With the German 6th, after the diminished 7s, augmented 6, he finds himself in the dominant of E minor. Now this is the moment where we have to make decisions, because it has to be 3 times, at least notated the same way, probably improvised differently, but if we play exactly, so many times we think about how to colorize differently each 4th higher. And the consecutive dissonance that comes out of each of them. With the appoggiatura. In the speed, then you can dissect in a slow tempo. It becomes very self-serving. So one can choose to play them straight loud, or perhaps do a little bit of a loud, soft, loud. Or the progression. Was predictable, and that shouldn't be. As much as the opening caught us by dramatic surprise, we need to do something that could be perhaps soft and loud, loud, or loud and soft, soft. I don't think it's a play to choose like randomly. I still think the progression of the ascending fourths leads us to believe that there is a crescendo. It's just perhaps we should do it much more subtly than involving our own psyche on top of it. It's already and I think that when you reach the highest of the fourths, you feel like you've reached some kind of climax, but it's not a climax. It's just the circle of fifths returning. So in fact, he doesn't really develop like Beethoven, who is so good at dissecting the theme and the movement and the beginning and the second and the first part and the third part together, and he's liking that. Mozart is not seemingly interested in an organic development with a lot of elements that are sort of chopped into pieces and cooked differently. I think it's more about just displaying the pain of the opening. So what could have been different is that in his time people would take these three printed equal reproductions of the pattern and trace them differently. Perhaps with a scale in the left hand for one of them, and perhaps some with a trim. Perhaps with a different pattern than always ta-dam, pa-pam. As much improvising as I did earlier when I made up a cheesy development. That, of course, improvised, it sounded terrible. This is not an improvisation on the core of it, it's more a decorative improvisation. Well, in any case, we have to be very careful about the fact that we are going to shock people if we start recomposing Mozart's notes, let less. So perhaps we should take from that the intensity of the repeated note and play on that, meaning intensify each of the notes to be more meaningful from inside the repeat of the note, as if it's inside like a pulse. Of course, the 3 times the reproduction is always based on having the minor second attacking that painful dissonance that is representative of the psychological pain. And at no point does he invert the contrapoint to do it with 7, sorry. Which is nevertheless less painful than the closeness of the minor second is really very painful compared to perhaps like D960 by Schubert. perhaps improvise differently if he didn't reproduce 3 times the same, but never say never. Perhaps for once he really played the 3 times because it was meant to be as dramatically making the point as if the opening is making the point. It's like the knife deep in the wound. Recapitulation where I just stopped, he has built up so much energy in that tutti section before, chromatically and dramatically, that when it goes back, instead of being the peak of it all, the arrival point with a crescendo, it seems more like an intimate moment. So when you open the sonata, you feel like you have to be aggressive in your pain, coming from the silence on the downbeat with like a cacciatura and the pumping chords, pump, 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 pump. Whenever after you do, it's anticlimactic. It's almost as if the recapitulation doesn't have the same driven pain forward. It's more like this time is really the wounded pain. That's how I hear it. Because if not, you have to oblige to play something louder, which on the modern piano then absolutely becomes overboard the stylistic frame of the 18th century. Even on the modern piano, and even more so. So in order to avoid that, you have to either have this anticlimactic, well, not perhaps as much dropped, but still it is withheld in the center, and not so displayed. So perhaps the only other way would be to finish on the dominant, and then take the beginning of the ascending scale chromatically in a dynamically soft mezzo something, mezzo piano, but not too piano, and crescendo, and not too crescendo, because the chromatic scale shouldn't be vulgarly crescendoed. It's not stylistically right. The chromaticism used as a dramatic effect, like Chopin in the V minor concerto's development. this nuclear amount of chromatic, desperate, dramatic demonstration, Mozart's, granted in this context, in the end of the 18th century, was obviously dramatic by itself compared to this amount of literally sheets of rain of chromatic descent, which symbolizes the dramatic display. It's fun to notice, it's not fun, it's curious that one reports that Berlioz at the 1849 funeral of Chopin delivered the eulogy, reportedly, I don't know if it's really true, but he addressed Chopin by an incantation, saying, "Chopin, all your life long you kept dying, writing descending chromatic scales," in that sense of decay, or that sense of representation of the pain of the soul. And it was an ironic statement, but at the same time so true for him, for Chopin's music. Mozart's usage of the chromaticism here is very limited in comparison to Chopin, and again that is why it's difficult for us today to play rightfully the Mozart without to inject it with the emotion that we know from the chromaticisms of later music, without either to empty it from any intensity, because it would have stylistically not been that. In other words, who has seen more is harder to focus on less. But I think it's important to find a way, therefore, if it's like a difficult scale to go up after all this dropping of circle of and re-rise again. But I don't find that possibly justifiable in terms of the dynamic frame of Mozart's music. I think it has to be elegant in the pain, elegant in the throw of the beat. Always think up. Sort of level of lightness of being in the drama. It's very, very 18th century like. Which is why I think it has to be anticlimactic compared to the first time. We are charged and ready to go into the drama. Had he done a longer obviously he didn't, and he shouldn't, after all. He's who he is, and I am nobody, and I try just to understand how to express what I feel he felt to express, and how not to betray him or his style rather than him, because it's not him, it's the work, and his work is it, and we are having this conceptual situation where we have to decide our posture compared to it, not in a museum and not in the soul, but both, with elegant reserve. And the dotted rhythm contributes to that element of alarming dum-da-dum-dum call. If there was not this dotted rhythm, it's all contributive, the rhythm, the suspension, the pain of minor second, the ostinato of each fourth up, and then the circle of fifths, and then dominant, and the chromatic scale. It all sounds so simple said like that, but it's not just that. It's through that, in between the lines, that this hinted suggestion has to arise. and reveal itself to us, and through the performer to the audience, in the most possible transparency. But we're only humans, and we add a lot of our own psyche on the piece. How much we should inject of it, in it rather. In the slow movement, he just indulges in an aria which is almost letting us daydream or forget the pain, or both. Oh, how not to love the leaps. The repeated notes. The child in Mozart, not the childishness, no, I think he's just child. In that sense, that is very serious, and a child inside his brain is not thinking he's a child. And that's what it is, taking seriously something very simple. There's a smile of grace in the music, but at the same time it's meaningful for the detail that could be banal to others. And of course, when the repeated notes become dramatic in the development, the same system of the development in the first movement, these suspensions that are so painful and beautifully intense in the minor second here is repeated. Trills are really the shaking, the shiver of the soul. There are no more embellishments. They're really vibrato. One could be critical towards the type of pedaling I just used because it overwhelmingly coats all these repeated notes and trills into a harmonization by accumulation. And if you let it suspended and more dry, it will be in between, so not truth the word, but perhaps the solution. So the pedal comes in the middle to enhance the resonance and then takes off before the change of harmony. So you can hear the three slur and three staccato. Tia ta 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 tia ta 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 ta. Becomes a requiem, like his requiem, more than anything in his development. And then, so innocently, in the sense of the word innocence. In the sense of goodness. Sense of generosity to the 10th. It's opening, it's not and why should it be explained? And why should even there be a connection between the toolbox that he used in many other pieces as well, like the F major concerto slow movement, C major, in F major slow movement. Anyway, he wrote always arias. think. And once this really well displayed and taking the time to express all the emotions of the human being, from tenderness to reminiscence to pain in the drama in the middle, and then return to this serene situation. His finale rondo is breathless, almost as if he's running behind fate and cannot catch. Talk about a downbeat theme, but this time by short breath. It's so short breath and choking almost. And if something is too fast, even slower, it still feels that. It's more settled with it. Upbeat eighth note rest, but downbeat, well, middle beat note. The duality of the two pulses between the two hands. Fuite en avant in French would say, some kind of a, you run scared forward and nothing can stop you. The first time was going instead of down to A minor to F major. And then C minor. An opening. And a smile in C minor. Something frantic about it. Not to overstate it, of course, because it's not yet Schubert's C minor. It's so easy to overwhelm it with our emotion of what we heard, even more developed in that style with Schubert's last movement of the C minor sonata. It's only what it is, but it's fully what it is. And therefore it should be controlled and not let myself or my students go overboard. Because it's parenthesis of major that is almost surreal. The repeated notes 2 by 2 by 2 with anticipation. Ta 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 ta. With most of the piano actions, doesn't suffer fast tempo. It looks like a cartoon going too fast. I think 2/4 by group of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. In order to try to maintain a unity of pulse, even through the major section. If not, the major section has to be meno mosso. Bit cutified, because at that point you have to overphrase, because it's so rococo and all that, and it is cute, not over-cutifying it. And then when it returns, we still feel like the wind blowing in our back going forward, like at the end. And he has this ostinato repeated chord note. Just subtly, or even dramatically, but still subtly reminding us of the opening. Well, this doesn't exist. It's my invention because of the development. But who am I to add the 16th note to Mozart? Or who are we to even think of it? Except that it's just comes as a natural flow after all this tam-ta-dam, heroic dotted rhythm that we had in the first movement. And, well, that is another question of what to indulge or not, but I will not. And again finishes on the not downbeat definitive. It just interrupts and like chiseled off of the element, cut off, young. Driven rather than aggressive or angry, but heroically driven. Almost those resonant repeated notes, like in the opening. It's so important that there's space between the chords. I was trying earlier to suggest that without pedal one can replay it inside the key and create a sense of continuum, finger pedal. But it takes away from the ostinato, almost quasi-percussive, even if on a harpsichord it wasn't as percussive. This beyond harpsichord and beyond piano is just about insisting on a minor chord. Of course, when it's fast tempo, it doesn't seem as heavy because it's more like da 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 dum rather than da da da. But it wraps well the elements of the three movements well. Not that you have, but the repeated note in the development of the slow movement. Repeated notes are in each movement differently. In the first, in the second, and in the third, and so on. Except it is part of the way to wrap the things. But when I play, I don't think. When I stop to think and I explain, I start overthinking. One should not overthink. One should just let the proportions of the piece guide us, the group of the bars, and just breathe with the music, rest with the rests, intensify with the intensity, and try not to get overexcited and to, at the same time, be driven. Not be driven. Still too much. One day, perhaps. Thank you.